Welcome to Inside Analog Photo. I'm your host, Scott Shepard. The Inside Analog Photo radio program is all about the traditional photographic process. We talk about all aspects of analog photography, including the hybrid workflow. You can find out more information over at www.insideanalogphoto.com. And of course, Inside Analog Photo is brought to you by Fujifilm, making life more colorful. These guys have the coolest instant photography materials known to mankind. They have, of course, the pack film and 3¼ by 4¼ and 4x5, color and black and white. They have the Instax systems in the wide format, the Instax 210 camera and film, and of course the Instax Mini in the Instax Mini 7 and the Instax Mini 25, both in color film. Beautiful stuff. There's nothing cooler than instant photography. You get a print, because if you don't have a print, you don't have a real photograph. This is great fun stuff. This is great for art. This is great for business. This is cool stuff. You definitely want to check them out over at www.fujifilmusa.com/professional, making life more colorful. Our friends over at Photo Publicist, providing worldwide publicity, strategic promotion, social media marketing, and business development for the photographer, turning photographers into celebrities. You can find out more information over at www.photopublicist.com. Our friends at Richard Photo Lab, for the highest quality work known to mankind anywhere on this planet. Unbelievable developing, scanning, and of course, output on high quality Fuji Crystal Archive. Unbelievable cool stuff these guys are up to. And remember, you don't have a photograph unless you have a print in your hand, and you need to print your pictures. This is important. You need to supply proofs to your customers and even print your own work, because it's not about looking at it on a monitor. It's about holding a print in your hand. Definitely check these guys out at Richard Photo Lab, of course, at richardphotolab.com. Our friends over at DR5 Chrome Black and White, developing that turns your black and white neg into, that's right, black and white chrome. Unbelievable stuff. www.dr5.com. Our friends over at Upstrap upstrap-pro.com for the camera strap that will not slip off your shoulder, guaranteed bar none, the coolest strap around. Our friends at Iger Studios, for the finest quality drum scans known to mankind, igerstudios.com. Our official media partner, APUG, the Analog Photography User Group, for all things traditional photographic process on the web, www.apug.org. And our official philanthropic partner, George Eastman House International Museum of Photography and Film, over at www.eastmanhouse.org. Today on Inside Analog Photo, we're going to be here with James Frederick Bland. James is a people, places, and products photographer for corporate clients, executive fine art portraiture, and all kinds of cool analog photography. His clients have included American Airlines, the Dallas Cowboys, PhotoFlex, and many, many more. And he's an all-around cool guy. Today we're going to talk to James about himself, his photography, his analog capture, and all the great stuff that he's up to. James, how you doing today?
I'm doing real well, Scott. And yourself?
Good. Thanks for joining us here on Inside Analog Photo. Great to have you on the program today to talk about yourself and your fabulous photography and all this great film work you're doing.
Well, thanks very much, Scott.
So, James, let's talk about yourself. Tell me about what you're currently doing, and then we'll start digging deeper.
Scott, I'm a professional photographer in Austin, Texas. I specialize in commercial subjects, and my best work is probably in still lifes and macro photography. But I do real sensitive, empathic portraits and try to appeal to the upper level of clients here in Austin, Texas.
So tell me what got you involved in photography. When did this inflection start?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm a graduate in the United States Naval Academy, and one of my professors, his name was Professor Massey, had actually worked for Kodak in their organic dyes for color film. So he would always talk about Kodak and his time there in the organic chemistry labs and things like that. So that was sort of interesting. And I had a camera there and was pursuing amateur photography and that sort of thing. When I graduated, I bought a Canon AE1 and kind of had that around with me and noticed that I was pretty good with it, but it never really struck me. In the Navy, I was in charge of optical systems and an infrared periscope. Then when I went to work for GE, my first job was with a terrestrial imaging digital satellite. Other parts of my career had other imaging things in them, but I ended up in medical diagnostic imaging, doing the marketing design for positron emission tomography and CT. So those are a lot of big words, but it gave me an appreciation for image quality, and we were dealing with x-rays and all kinds of other things. At any rate, I was introduced to a professional photographer who was leading an expedition, and he needed to fill it out and invited me along at a reduced rate. It was a week in Yellowstone Park, and the same Canon AE-1 that I'd been using 20-some-odd years before was still on the shelf, only by this time the automatic exposure function wasn't working with the lenses. So I didn't have time to repair the camera and borrowed some lenses and went out to Yellowstone and shot the entire week in chromes in manual. And part of the expedition, the professional leading the tour offered to critique the work, your best 40 or 50 shots or something like that from the week. So I'd taken, 10 or 15 rolls of film and shot most of that and selected about 50 shots out of that and sent it to him. And about 2 hours after the package arrived, he calls me up and he says, "I thought your camera was broken." And I said, "Yeah, it was. I had to shoot the whole week in manual, remember?" And he said, "Yeah, that's what I thought." He said, "I got to tell you, you got a real eye for things. I'm really impressed with what you did." So this was kind of the thing that sort of told me I might have something going on. And then as the economy slid downhill and everything else, I found myself out of my career, as it were, and looking for other things to do, and started working with another photographer running his business and shooting and learning more about professional photography. 2 years after that, I stepped out on my own, and I've been doing that ever since. All of my camera equipment was film to start with, and now I have a combination of digital medium format backs and film equipment. But I have a refrigerator full of Polaroid, or instant film, as Fuji likes to call it, and Velvia, and medium format, and large format, and I load my own slides and everything else. I really enjoy the look of film, and to me, it's kind of more of a finished product when it comes out of the camera. If you take the time to pre-visualize and consider what's before you as opposed to just pushing the shutter down and letting things roll like some people do with the digital format.
So you've really had no interest in photography or did any of that when you were in high school or as a kid or anything?
I did, but we as a family didn't have a lot of money for things like that. My mother, who is now over 80, the other day sent me her Brownie Synchro. You can still get film for it at B&H, but it's not much of a camera. And my dad wasn't very technical at all. I still have a slide that I shot at the Naval Academy with a 110 format camera. It's one of those slides that basically proves it's not so much the camera, it's the nut behind the camera that's the most important piece of equipment. But no, it hasn't been a lifelong passion, but it's something that I found that I had a real talent for and enjoyed doing. So that's how I came to photography.
So tell me about the interweaving and mix of what you're doing now commercially and personal with digital and film. Do you find that you're saving film for personal work? Do you find that clients want film? What are you seeing in the industry?
Well, I find that by and large, people expect you to work in digital as a commercial photographer because they want to look over your shoulder while you're doing it, and they also want it yesterday fast most of the time. Even with 2-hour E6 processing, the creative directors and other people, they've been trained to look over your shoulder, or if nothing else, if you're not hooked up on a tether to a monitor, to look at the camera back and be able to comment. So in some respects, that's really speeded up production and allowed a communication between your client and yourself, and even the models if you have a monitor running while you're doing some things. But in other respects, I think it's kind of taken some of the creativity out of the photographer's hands. I still offer to do things in any format anybody wants to. And I'll explain the process and the differences and that sort of thing. But the younger people haven't really been exposed to film, so their whole photographic experience has been digital for the most part. And in some respects, that's a plus because they'll see the output in a different way when it's film. It has a different look. It has its own look. Digital is very, I'll call it square, and film is kind of round and curvy. So I think that there's a place for it, but by and large, due to time constraints and productivity, most of the work these days that I do for a commercial job is in digital. That's why I bought a medium format back, was that I wanted to get the highest dynamic range, something that people were saying exceeded the capability of film in the sizes that might go into magazines or other commercial production materials.
Do you find on these commercial jobs that you shoot film side by side just because you've already set something up, so I'm going to grab one image on film? Or is it just, if it's commercial work, it doesn't really matter, people are paying, take the digital and run?
Bit of productivity. I normally don't set up two cameras, but actually that's a pretty good idea, and I should probably do more of that, to be honest with you. And then I would actually have a side-by-side comparison to show to people. That's actually something I hadn't really thought about, Scott, so I appreciate that suggestion. You kind of get caught up in the moment and the bottom line of getting the thing produced and back to the customer so that he can get on with whatever he's doing. But it wouldn't take that much of an effort to shoot something side by side, so I appreciate the suggestion.
What medium format rig are you shooting with now?
I have Mamiya equipment. I have an RZ67 and a 37 millimeter 65, 110, 180, 250, and 500 millimeter lenses. And the 250 and 500 are APO color-corrected lenses.
So see how easy with the RZ, just pop that digiback off and throw the film back
absolutely.
on.
That's what it's set up for, and that's the primary reason I bought the digital system that would go on the back of that. That plus I had the glass, and the sharpness in the center of the images is just incredible. I really get a charge out of showing people the microscopic detail on their faces or the product or whatever, little specks of dust that you can't even see when the image is up. You can just bore right on down, and you just absolutely don't lose any resolution at all. So it's a real fun system to shoot with.
So let's talk about your use for film then. Is for just personal work, recreational shooting, and what back are you using digital?
As far as the digital backs, I'm using a Leaf Aptus 6-2, which is a 28 megapixel. It's approximately 6,000 by 4,500 pixels in size, and the physical size of it is about a 44 by 33 millimeters in dimension.
Okay, so I guess what the question is when you decide to leave the Leaf at home and put a film back on the RZ or grab something else and actually say, I'm going to shoot film today, I'm not going to do any digital.
I've taken the RZ out for a walk, and it's heavy. So anytime I've got to go shoot something in the backwoods or on location or something like that, I grab a 35 millimeter camera, or I take my large format field camera and go out and shoot that. The weight of the equipment with the large format isn't much different than what I have to take along with a 35 millimeter, the size of 35 millimeters these days. The higher resolution ones, they've got the battery packs, and so with the lens on it and everything else, it's about the same weight as a large format field camera. But sports and action, if it's moving, then I think you have to go for 35 millimeter. I have a Zeiss Icon rangefinder film camera that I just got. I'm actually taking that on a trip with me to do some, I guess I'll call it photojournalistic style street photography. And I bought it specifically for that, 35 millimeter lens on it. And I'm kind of going to go force the creativity with just going with one lens, and I'm traveling light with that. And I'm going to take chrome film, C41 chromogenic black and white film, and maybe some Kodak Plus X, and get creative. And that's the biggest reason I kind of like shooting with film, is that if you want to get in kind of creative mode and leave all the electronics behind and understand what you do is not dependent on whether your power supplies are all the way up, you go back and charge up your batteries at the hotel room or something like that, then film is really still convenient that way. It travels light, and there's not a lot of auxiliary equipment that you got to take with you, which I find convenient.
Do you find that the RZ, when you're shooting film, and this would be applicable with the digital as well, do you find the RZ to be a hamper because it has slower glass than other systems?
No, actually, the 180 lens on the RZ is a 2.8 lens. I forget what the next f-stop up, it's either 3.5 or 4.5, so they're really not all that much slower. Maybe one stop slower than the fastest glass I've got on my 35 millimeter camera. So the large format's 5.6 is the slowest f-stop, and the Zeiss Icon is a 2. So I don't find that the medium format is all that much of a hamper or slower. I shoot most things on a tripod anyway, so that's not a consideration either. And I shoot things on a tripod to get that ultimate resolution and stillness. I have a Lensa dual action shutter release on the RZ2. So the other day I went out, and just because I took the RZ to the ball diamond and wanted to test out a concept And I had the 500 millimeter lens. It was minor league ball club, but I was sitting up in the bleachers and timing the pitches. I could get the ball coming into the frame. I can get the ball going off of the batter's back. And it's just one of those things, like everything else, a little bit of planning goes a long way. And I'm probably shooting, I don't know, a half to 1/4 of the number of frames that somebody else might do going out to an event or something like that. I personally don't like to spend a lot of time editing or making decisions on which shots I'm going to keep and which shots I'm not. So I tend to do a lot of metering and preparation, and then I don't have a lot of images to sort through afterwards. Just my personal style of working.
What kind of meter are you using? What do you like to meter with?
I have an old Minolta meter, and I can't even tell you what the designation is, but it's got a 10-degree spot attachment on it, and we'll also do flash photography. But I just recently got a Tonic 358, which is a really nice meter, and I've got the remote flash triggering on it, the Pocket Wizard. So I remotely trigger the Pocket Wizard with that, and it's very convenient in the studio. Gets rid of all the wires and all the claptrap around your feet, and it's really nice.
Do you tend to prefer natural light when you're shooting or even in studio, artificial strobe or natural?
Well, I use the right tool for the right job, or as the situation dictates. The other day I had the opportunity to shoot for the National Guitar Federation of America here in Austin. They were having an international contest, and the Austin Classical Guitar Society was also co-sponsoring the event. And the top 4 finalists for the adult competition were provided to me to shoot their portraits. They wanted it done on location in the Long Center downtown, and they were having a vendor event also. So the first 2 floors with the highest ceilings and everything were taken. So I ended up on the balcony level with northeast-facing windows, lots of light just bathing the entire room. It was very nice, but the ceilings were really, really low. It wasn't optimal for setting up strobes, and the combination of light might have provided some difficulties. I also brought along some white bounces and some other light modifiers and diffusers. I set up my backdrop and other light control devices and just used the natural sunlight that was coming in the windows, and the portraits turned out excellent. Other times, I'll have 5 lights running in the studio and be real meticulous about how I'm shooting another subject or another person. So it kind of depends a little bit on how I feel about the day, but also the location and what's available, what I think is going to provide the photography that is most relevant to what I'm being asked to do.
What do you like to shoot the most? People, places, animals? I mean, if you had one thing to pick, James, what would you want to shoot?
Wow, you're going to be real tough on me, aren't you?
Really hot-looking girls, right, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, I do like to do figure work. But I like to do it in the style of Irving Penn, so I'm not quite sure what that says about me. I started out doing landscape photography. There's something real zen-like about going out in the middle of winter and kind of picking your spots and creating art that way. But I really enjoy doing still lifes and product photography. It really allows me a wide latitude of creativity, especially if I'm doing it for myself. And I've done, I think, some pretty good work that way. And if I don't have a paying assignment to do, I'll sit down and figure out something hard to do and then go and challenge myself in the studio. But I guess the real answer to your question is my favorite thing to shoot is probably the last assignment that I did, because I really kind of put my passion into each segment that I attack. So I don't know if that's a fair answer to your question.
I think it's interesting to find that you have this drive and you want to keep shooting compelling images. And like you said, the last gig I shot was what I wanted to do and the favorite thing I've been doing, because it just shows that you have this passion for photography. So tell me about your processing. Are you shooting mostly all black and white now? Do you shoot chrome still a lot? What do you like for your film stocks? What do you like to shoot?
I started out shooting Velvia with the landscapes because of the saturation and getting up early and waiting for the golden hour at the end of the day. And that just blows me away. I go back and review some of the things that I did, and the images still kind of excite me. But I've been experimenting with film along the way, and I really like the simplicity and the abstractness of black and white images. And the people who see my work, it's kind of funny. They will comment that this is nice and that's nice and everything, but I really like your black and white photography. So that's, I think, where I'm gravitating for. The film I have been using is Kodak Plus X. and Ilford FP4 because there's a little bit of latitude to play around with the exposure and get some different effects by pushing or pulling while you're shooting and also in the lab. And then, obviously, you can digitize it and then have a field day in Photoshop. Recently, I've been playing around with chromogenic film, and I kind of like the looks of that, too. Each one of them have a character. So lately I've been playing around with Tri-X and either the Kodak or the Ilford chromogenic film, seeing how that turns out and trying to get an idea of where each one applies best. For large format, I have been using primarily either FP4 or the Fuji Acros 100. Now, I'm going to have to criticize Fuji just a little bit. They've done this now for a number of their films. They used to have, and still do for some, but the quick load format, which I found really simple and convenient and nice to use because you didn't have to worry about dust on your film slides and film holders and that sort of thing. And it was easy to transport and give to the lab and a little less personal handling than loading your own film holders. But I've gotten used to and don't really have a problem with doing film holders too. Now everything's in sheet format, so it's not quite as convenient. I really thought that the quick load format was super convenient, but it's the way life is these days. I don't know why Fuji did it. I guess there was something about some biohazard or something. Either that or else it just wasn't enough volume for them to continue to produce that particular format. I miss it, but kind of move on and deal with it.
It is very, very handy to drop in an envelope like an old Polaroid 55 or 54 or whatever you were shooting. Basically, don't have to worry about dust or anything. You don't need all these film backs. I think some of the stuff is still available in Japan, but I don't think the U.S. market was selling enough volume to keep doing the importing or however they work that program. So it is a bummer.
And I keep reading that film is holding its own or leveling off or something like that. So maybe as people discover that you can either spend a little time with the lab or spend a lot of time in Photoshop to get the look that you want. To me, that's kind of where it's at. I just sort of wonder if people that spend a lot of time sort of zeroing in, and I guess eventually they make an action or something in Photoshop to replicate the film that they like to use or the look that they like to see. But it is so much simpler for me to just make a decision and then use the material I want to use and deliver the product that I want to deliver.
Well, really talking about that, since you have this very nice Leaf app, this expensive digital back for the RZ, how do you compare what you've been able to convert from the Leaf back in Photoshop using Silver Effects Pro from Nick or whatever software, or even in Photoshop itself, to what you're shooting on true black and white film?
Oh boy, that's a tough question for me.
Because you are shooting black and white film and you love black and white imagery and people always comment on your black and white. I wonder if you played around with doing these conversions with the digital and see if you can get the same look. Or is it just a matter of it's just too much of a time sucker and I'd rather just shoot it and start with black and white?
Yeah, well, my process for digital is to shoot it in color and then take it into RAW in Lightroom primarily. Then make the adjustments for levels and all the rest of that stuff. Do a good digital workflow. And then when I got the image kind of where I want it, if I've shot it in color, then either one or two ways. I either go grayscale down on the curves level. Sometimes if I want to take a quick look, I just do it up at top and on the basic settings and just turn it in black and white image. But when I get it into grayscale down in the curves, then I start playing around with the shadows and the highlights to get things to look the way I want. I guess it would be contrast-wise with the curve. So it never really does look like the film because, like I said, digital is kind of square.
Sterile. It's like walking into a hospital.
Yeah, there's nothing dirty about it. No, absolutely. So I guess what I'll say is I produce a digital black and white image to the best ability that I can, and I don't spend a lot of time trying to get it to look like film. If I want a film black and white image, I shoot film.
See, there you go. Why play around with something that works?
I think it's a waste of time, quite honestly. You're sitting there doodling. Some people like to, and they claim that they're fast, but I know that they're spending 3 times the time that they say that they actually spend. If they say, it only takes 20 minutes, okay, yeah, I'll believe you. Maybe on the 4th or 5th image that you've played around with, or you got an action that you've already done. But I bet that first image was an hour or two of playing around and getting it exactly the way that you wanted it.
Yeah, well, we have film and we're lucky. So bottom line is you can't complain. There's cool stuff to be able to shoot. And I think there's never interesting things to run out of the shoot. So I think that's why shooting film is so cool, because it's a never-ending things to do.
And if we start running out of oil and other things, there'll probably always be a way to produce a film base, but I'm not sure there'll be enough electricity in the world for digital. The only other thing I'd add on kind of going out and shooting black and white is that I'm going on a trip, and because I knew I was going to be doing a certain kind of photography, I went out and bought a Zeiss Icon rangefinder, and I'm taking nothing but black and white film. I might take a couple of rolls of color film, but I'm specifically sort of pre-visualizing what I want to do and how I want to do it, and loading up and being very deliberate about the way that I'm attacking the problem. And I'm kind of excited about it.
So where are we going on this fabulous vacation that's going to have these unbelievable photographic opportunities?
Well, we start out in Stockholm, Sweden.
Nice.
And then it's kind of island hopping over to St. Petersburg, Russia for 3 days. And I'm scheduled to go to the Hermitage and look at the cathedrals and synagogues in St. Petersburg. And then we're on to Estonia and end up in Copenhagen.
Wow.
So there's going to be all kinds of things I've never seen before. And that's when I find that my head goes into visual overload and I get really excited about what's in front of the camera.
Very different scenery than Austin.
Yep, they might actually have snow this time of year.
Oh, I bet you'd be looking for some of that right now.
Yeah, a little bit.
So with shooting this digital stuff for work, of course, shooting this film and your love for film, what do you want to shoot, James, that you haven't got to do? What is there something photographically in your career, your personal work that you want to shoot? Is there a certain type of photography, a certain kind of gear? What do you want to do that you haven't got to do yet?
Well, kind of for a personal project, I spent 6 years on active duty in the Navy, training to be on and actually serving on a nuclear fast attack submarine. And I can't tell you the number of times I kind of looked in one direction or another, and I saw art. This sounds really strange, but I saw art in the way that the valves and the pipes were arranged and the way the meters are laid out and things like that. I would relish the opportunity to get back on board a nuclear submarine and just for a couple of days figure out a way to shoot that and make it look like something. I can't remember the producer now, but the original film Alien with Sigourney Weaver. And the alien crawls into the pipes and actually looks like it's part of the machinery and that sort of thing. There's an artist, man, what's his name? But he's very mechanical looking and his beings are very robotic looking, cyborg sort of. I mean, even the women are really sexy, but they look part machine and part human. It's a German. I can't remember the guy's name. It's like Mannheim or something like that. But at any rate, that's what I see. I just remember looking at all of this piping and stuff, and the boat was an organism. It was alive. You could feel it under your feet. When the boat was accelerating, you could feel the torque in the hull and how it would relax when you finally got up to the speed that you were accelerating to. And you could listen to the diesel engine clattering away like it was breaking rocks for about an hour. Literally, it was almost an hour to the minute. You could time it. It was very precise. But you'd be warming this diesel engine up, and when all the temperatures had equalized throughout the entire engine, the sound of the engine would instantaneously change. And it wasn't just me that would notice this. The machinist mates that were working for me would also be attuned to those sorts of sounds and changes and that sort of thing. So a submarine, it's really kind of an organism. It's about the closest thing I know of to a living machine. So at any rate, that's what I've always thought would be fun to do.
That one's you're going to have to go back and sign up for the reserves or something to get to that one, huh?
Well, I'll have to call in a favor for sure.
I'm sure you can get on, though. I'm sure at some point it would be a nice PR thing for them, and you never know.
But as far as other things, I haven't really settled. I guess that's the nice thing about coming back to a passion later in a working career or your life is that I haven't really settled on anything. I'm not really, I only shoot this. About the only thing I won't create images for is the wedding day. I'm not wired that way. If somebody begged me 3 or 4 times, maybe I'd do it. But not my first inclination to get involved with the bride and the mother of the bride on the wedding day.
And also, you get one shot and you can't go back and redo it. So it's an incredible amount of stress to do weddings on top of it.
Well, you're thinking about other things. I guess the other thing that says about me is I'm a really considered sort of a photographer. I like to be able to sort of find that special moment or that small reality within the bigger whole of the picture. And sometimes that's not an instantaneous sort of a thing. Although people like the way I do events and things like that, it's just not my natural calling. And what I really like to do is find something that just makes a connection with the viewer and reveals something that they might not have considered about a time, a space, or an object.
So tell me, how do we find out about your work, your blog, the website? Where can they see what you're up to? I know you're posting cool things on the blog and linking to some other people's stories, so it's a nice resource. Where can people find out about what James is doing and what you're talking about and what's going on? Where can they see your beautiful photography?
Well, we'll start with my website. And a woman by the name of Tiffany Cole Anderson and Marilyn McCrae got together and helped me conceptualize that. So it's not a cookie-cutter website. The URL is jamesf, as in frederickbland.com. And I also have another URL linked to the site. It's license-2-thrill.com. And the story behind that is, with a name like Bland, occasionally somebody comes up to you and says, oh, that's like Bond, right? James Bond. So after hearing that most of my life, I finally decided that, okay, guys, this is what I'm going to do. So I kind of capitalized on that. You don't want to have a website called Bland Photography. So at any rate, I use my name, and then my tagline is images with a license to thrill. In the information section in there are links to my Facebook page, my blog page, and my blog is on, I guess it's Google Blogger at this point, or Blogspot. And the name of it is In Search of the Invisible. And I got that title from a Time Life book series. It's one of the chapter headers in the History of Photography section in the series of books, Time Life books that were published back in the 70s, which also, I think, gives people a real thrill to look at those and see what people were doing with film and the great people on whose shoulders we stand today. I love just to leaf through those books and look at the images and the different ways that photography has evolved. So those are the two spots that you can quickly find me. I have a Facebook professional page, I guess I'll call it. It's James Frederick Bland, Images by James. And then I also have a Facebook page. It's James Frederick Bland. The reason I use my middle name is that there's actually another photographer in Texas by the name of James Bland, and he's up in Dallas. So not to be confused.
No, it's great stuff. Beautiful website and really cool images. And I do really appreciate it that you took the time today, James, to chat with us and tell us about your photography. And this is just cool stuff you're doing, buddy. It's very neat.
Well, I really appreciate the compliment, Scott, and thank you very much for considering me. I appreciate that also.
Well, there you go. James Frederick Bland. What a great guy. Beautiful photography, cool stuff that he's up to. Interesting background. Definitely check out James's website for more information. He's a cool guy and does some beautiful photography. The Inside Analog Photo radio program has been brought to you by Fujifilm for their full line of instant cameras and film, and of course, fine quality Fuji Crystal Archive paper over at www.fujifilmusa.com/professional. Our friends at Photo Publicist, worldwide publicity, strategic promotion, social media marketing, and business development over at www.photopublicist.com. Our friends at Richard Photo Lab for the finest quality lab in the country, richardphotolab.com. Our friends over at DR5 for black and white chrome at dr5.com. Upstrap for the finest quality camera strap that will not slide off your shoulder at upstrap-pro.com. Our friends over at Iger Studios at igerstudios.com. And of course, our media partners of the Analog Photography User Group at apug.org, and our official philanthropic partner, George Eastman House, over at eastmanhouse.org. I've been your host, Scott Shippert, here on Inside Analog Photo. We'll be back next week with more great analog photography.